Welcome back, and thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to run through a tabletop exercise based on a 2021 pipeline ransomware incident. Now, this is a real incident that involved dark side ransomware operations and affected a pipeline's IT network. Public record and government guidance indicated there was no indication at the time that the ransomware directly affected the company's operational technology network. However, the incident still resulted in significant operation disruption. So, for today's exercise, I'm going to simplify this scenario. I'm also going to introduce information to you a little bit at a time. The goal isn't to see if we can guess what happened. The goal is to ask, what would we do with the information that we get right now? Because during a real incident, you rarely have all the information that you want. I want to be clear. This is a learning exercise that I'm doing. I may not always have the right answer, but you will get to see me talk through it. So sit back, enjoy, and if you have any comments, please feel free to add your insight. So, today's scenario, we are going to be the CISO of a large fuel pipeline company. Our organization's operations critical infrastructure and transports fuel throughout the United States. Let me read that again. Your organization operates critical infrastructure and transports fuel throughout the United States. In early Monday morning, your SOC received several alerts indicating suspicious activity involving systems with corporate IT environment. Shortly afterward, employees began reporting that they cannot access several systems. Your SOC confirms that multiple systems are showing signs of ransomware. At this point, you know multiple IT systems are affected, files are being encrypted, some systems are unavailable, the scope is still going to be unknown at this time, and you do not have evidence that operational technology has been compromised. So, our first question we got to answer, what do we do first? Remember, we are a CISO. What is going to be our first priority? Alright, so the key on this one is we got to realize that we are higher level. In incident response, we'd be thinking a lot differently in this scenario. As a CISO, we need to understand the scope that's going to stop further damage. Where has been encrypted, where hasn't, and how can we stop the growth of this encryption or what's taking our network down? So, we need to find out what systems are affected. Are any communication affected? Are we able to still communicate through environment? Are systems still being affected? Now, when we're looking at this, we also need to know, are any critical systems being affected? Domain controllers, any of the critical infrastructure that we have in our environment. After we understand that, to me, the next thing I'd ask, are backups available? Do we still have them? Now, I don't believe we'd want to bring these up at this time, but at least we need to know that they are separate, so when we can bring them back up, we have the availability. Finally, I guess I'd ask, is there any evidence of credential compromise, and perhaps most importantly, is its attack contained? Do we have it contained, or is it still spreading? Also, is there any indication, being a pipeline, that any OT or any other critical operations are affected? That would be, I think, where I'd want the answers starting. So hopefully we could get those answers moving forward and get that resolved. Now, again, as a CISO, you're looking at more high level. So you may not have all this. It's probably not going to come quickly, but I think that those answers need, so you can spread that to the rest of the board. All right. We'll go to the next inject. 30 minutes later, your team confirms that ransomware activity is currently isolated to the corporate IT environment. There is currently no evidence that the OT environment had been directly compromised, which is good. However, several IT systems support the organization's ability to manage and operate the business. So, we kind of have an understanding of the scope. It's hit our corporate IT environment. And it's kind of isolated there, so we haven't seen it spread out to our OT. Doesn't sound like it's hit any domain controllers. Communication probably still up, but right now we kind of have it isolated just in the environment. So, next question that we're getting asked is, Should we shut down the network? And what's our recommendation? Okay. So, to me, when you're in that high level, you need to speak with confidence, understand that when you make a suggestion or statement, it has to have some weight behind it. So, to me, in this scenario, if I was asked this, I definitely would, well, I don't want to say definitely, I would not immediately recommend shutting down the entire network. I'd first determine whether we can contain the affected systems through segmentation or target isolation. Can we quarantine the machines? Can we take the network and reroute where it's not getting outside? But without shutting off our OT, compromising the rest of the environment. There's a significant difference between an IT environment that's been compromised and the entire company being disconnected from the network. If we can contain the infection, the ransomware, into whatever scope that is, without letting it get out, I think we can definitely keep whatever is still functioning. I'd want to understand the organizational consequences of both options. So this is again where we need to start talking to higher levels and getting that risk of, if we shut down, what is going to be the cost? If disconnect systems protect the organization from further spread, but creates a significant operational safety risk, leadership needs to understand that trade-off. So before we make those decisions, we have to have those conversations. If we shut down our network, what is the cost? If we just cut out this part of our network, able to still do certain functions, but maybe some of the other functions we have to go to our downtime procedures. Do we have downtime procedures? Do we know this information? My recommendation would be based on that available evidence. So again, we don't answer right away. We want to get more information before we answer those questions. And then again, at the end of the day, we need to let the company make those decisions. We just give our guidance. I'd present leadership with options, the risk, and the less likely consequences. Ultimately, the business decisions belong to the executive leadership, as I just said. Okay, let's see where we're at. So, right now, we know it's in the IT. It's kind of isolated in the IT operations. It hasn't hit any OT devices. Doesn't sound like it's hit any critical infrastructure. We've let the CEO and the business know, hey, here's your decisions you have to make. If you shut down the whole network, these are the consequences. If you don't, there's still consequences, but we believe this will be the less. So, our investigation continues. The team discovers evidence suggests that attackers obtained access to the corporate network before deploying the ransomware. Okay, so, like most ransomware, they were in our environment before they deployed the ransomware. We don't know how long. We don't have that information. We just know there's evidence showing that they were in, which makes sense. You also don't know how long they were present. Yeah, I just said that. Your incident response team wants to immediately begin rebuilding systems. The forensics team wants to preserve evidence. The CEO asks, with a valid question, why aren't we wiping everything and starting over? Here is going to be, I don't want to say make or break, but these are very critical decisions in my opinion, that need to be made. Business wants to run. Operations want to, you know what? We got it contained. We want to start building. Push everything aside. Just wipe and rebuild. We still have our backups. Who cares how they got in? The security side wants to be like, we need to understand and get more information. It's a balancing act. So when they come to you and ask, I guess you need to first start with some empathy. I understand the desire to restore the operation as quickly as possible. However, wiping the systems immediately could destroy valuable forensics evidence that we need to. Now, and they need to understand they're not going to care what the forensics evidence. So maybe phrase it, wiping systems immediately can destroy the chance for us to discover how they got into our environment, what they did in our environment, so that we don't have a repeat event, a repeat incident. And we need to balance that recovery with investigation. So before we're building systems, I want to make sure we've collected the evidence necessary to understand. At this point, they may ask times. Obviously, I'm kind of going off here. Mark has not been asked that question, but I can imagine they'd want to understand more of what that scope would be. Things that we would want to look for, things like that. So, and we could go over it. We'd want to know how they gained access, where the lateral movement was, things like that. And we would need to give them those time frames. How quickly could we get that evidence off the systems, those forensic artifacts, and start rebuilding? Do we need to get it off of every system? These were things that we need to balance, and these are great questions that we need to know beforehand. Do we have a forensic team? Does, us as a pipeline company have it? Not many companies have those forensic teams. And would that be something that's feasible? Do we need to have a third party come in and do this? Is it worth that company? So, again, this is a balancing act. To me, the business needs to make that decision ultimately. Can we save 5 systems, reimage the rest? Do we have systems that we can just build up in that infrastructure and keep some just to the side? These are questions that would need to be answered by the business. And I think having those conversations before, that's why we do these tabletop exercises, are critical. All right, let's see where we're at. So we've kind of given them that, kind of went through that. So let's go. Leadership now asks different questions. Do we need to notify law enforcement? Very valid. So we've been hit with a ransomware. We know that they've been in our environment through forensic discovery. I mean, obviously they haven't told us anything, but have they taken information? Is there information that's proprietary that we don't want out? Is there any PPI, personal private information? Obviously, these kind of things that we need to know, is that something that we need to worry about? So they came to us now and they said, okay, so you've gotten this, you're starting to rebuild things. Do we need to notify law enforcement? I would recommend involving the appropriate law enforcement and government partners according to the organization's incident response plan and application requirements. So here is where I would need to understand more of what the business requirements are legally. Certain companies need to understand. Now, we're a pipeline, so we're probably federal mandated, maybe money's coming in. We're dealing with multiple different organizations. So to me, being a critical infrastructure organization, there's significant value in sharing that information with the FBI, CISA, and law enforcement. But business should have those playbooks or those plans in action. When and who do they contact? You don't just call 911. Who are we getting a hold of? Also involve legal counsel. Get our lawyers involved. They should have those answers. How are they going to distribute that information? And once you disclose that, it's going to be public information. And again, that needs to be decided by the high levels. I wouldn't make that decision based solely on the technical investigation. That has nothing to do with it. This needs to be, there are legal, regulatory, contractual, insurance that need to be evaluated in this. So this is going to be a big decision that you're going to be part of, but at the end of the day, all you're going to be doing is giving information. The company needs to know, or if they don't, we need to start planning on knowing how, when, and who are going to be contacted in these events. Oh, excuse me. All right. The investigation now indicates the attacker may access sensitive company information. You still don't know exactly what information was taken. Okay, I'm not sure what sensitive information a pipeline has, but maybe it has who the items are going to, business accounts, things like that. Do we tell our customers? Here again, according to, for the last one, this is not, in my opinion, the CISO's decision. This again comes down to business regulations and a business decision. Personally, yes, but you can't think in that personal way. In business, you need to think logically and how it would. So I would not make that decision by myself. At this point, I'd bring together executive leadership, legal counsel, If you have a privacy compliance, personnel, communications, your cyber insurance, bring them together. They're the ones that we need to make those decisions. I am here to just give that information that we've gathered. Hey, we have seen that there's evidence that information may have been taken. Again, nothing is concrete at this point. We believe they had access to this information. We're not positive they took it. High likelihood, medium likelihood, there's a likelihood that this is taken. Here's what happened. Here's the systems they accessed. Here's the evidence. Again, your job, my job as a CISO in this scenario is to give that information, to the board that we're meeting with for them to make that decision. And again, it comes down with confidence. Here's what I know, but don't spread a tale. You're not here to cause fear. You're not here to blow things up. Here's the facts. This is what I know at this time. We're getting more information, but this is the information we know. And you go from there. And we're not simply asking, can we stop the attacker? It's, what does it mean to the organization? When you're the lower level instant response stuff, those are more questions you would ask. Here, what loss of reputation? Obviously cost. Do we need different infrastructure? What's our insurance going to do when it hits us? They're looking at the business impact, not just the technical. At this point, the technical's out the window. It's what has happened, what do we need to do, and how can we bounce back and go forward from this? Those would be my thoughts on that. All right. Final inject. After several days of investigation and recovery, the organization begins restoring critical systems, and immediately the imminent ransomware threat has been contained. Now, so we've been days, we've gotten all our infrastructure back up, kind of back on track. We've gotten the information we needed. Decisions have been made. Now it comes to the question that is going to be happening. It's probably been asked before, but how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? What recommendations would you make? Now, this, I've heard phrases, and I love it. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Majority companies, I can't say for all, but a lot of the ones I've worked at, security is second, maybe even fifth place, 10th place, depending on how big the company is, to operations. Once a crisis happens, you're going to be in the limelight. I think this question's a little vague. They're going to want to know how it happened. Who failed? Did something fail? Was it preventable? And then the question, obviously, is how do you make sure this doesn't happen again? And here's where you want to be careful. Because if you just start throwing, we need this tool, we need that tool, the question is, why? What would that tool have done differently? So instead, I think, again, this is high level, as I said, lower level, my first thought would be that kind of stuff. As a higher level, I think we need to ask ourselves, where are the highest risk gaps? Do we have good asset management? Do we have, a proper updating process? Are we patching? Are we utilizing our tools to their fullest? Are our staff, these are things that we need to ask ourselves. Our identity access management. Do we have multi-factor authentication? Do we have device control? Are these needed? How do we audit whether things are used? Logging, monitoring, our backup protection. These are things that you need to go back and start with your team to present those findings and say, okay, we did our best, but we never had good device protection. They stuck a USB in. We've never watched that before. This is where we need to look at. From there, with that buy-in, then you have to have solutions. Do we have a tool that does it? Do we have the manpower to manage device protection? What policies do we need to set in that? Or, for example, patching. How are we patching our systems? They got in through a vulnerability that we hadn't patched for 10 years. These are the answers and questions I think need to be in place for you to answer those questions. How do you make the organization more resilient when prevention fails? Like, those are the questions. So that is, I think, the tabletop. I know. How do I do? All right. So going over everything, here's some things that I feel I learned from this scenario. Cybersecurity instances are business incidences. The security team doesn't operate in isolation. The security team needs to work with operations and other teams to really be successful. Much as we think we can lock everything down, we need that support, and we need buy-in from upper management. You need to make decisions with incomplete information. You can't always have all the information. They ask us things like shutting down the network. Should we build up information or build up the systems back up, even though we hadn't had all the information? Those are things that you sometimes will have to make a judgment call. You cannot wait until all of that information is in your plate. And you have to have the confidence to make that, and hopefully that's through experience and other things. Business continuity matters. Protecting systems is important, but so is keeping the organization operational. Making those decisions that don't just make our security mindset where we want to figure everything out. How are we going to keep operations going so the business can thrive and still come back? Finally, communications matter. During a major incident, leadership doesn't necessarily need every technical detail, but they do need to understand what is happening, what has been impacted, what are our options in this, what are the risks, and what decisions need to be made. Again, these are things that you can't do as a CISO or in the security. You need to bring the full business board involved and let them come to the ultimate decision. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up my first tabletop exercise, and I'd really like to hear from you. If you were a CISO in this scenario, what would you have shut down the network? What would your first priorities be? And please let me know what I missed. This is my first time doing this. I've been through tabletop exercises, but it's always been on the technical level. I would like to try and push myself. Now, with that said, I think I'm going to do another one next week, but I'm going to do it more on the instant response side. I want to do it more on where I'm more comfortable, and maybe compare and see how they differ. So stay tuned for next week. I really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for joining me, and see you all next week. Bye.